So, today I want to talk about the state of Illinois' newly proposed Texas Act. Now, I've needed a little bit of levity as of late with all that's been going on, from the issues around the climate to the failures of government, and especially in the topics of the anti abortion laws that have been passed in a lot of states, and especially the one that happened in Texas, which effectively overturned Roe v. Wade and made it so that pregnancies after 6 weeks could no longer be terminated. And so I wanted to take some time to highlight this act that's being talked about in the state of Illinois, which is specifically meant to poke at the holes of the Texas anti abortion law and be kind of trolly towards it. While the Illinois politician who is proposing this is quite serious about the bill getting co sponsors and going to the floor and being discussed, I don't believe the act should be taken entirely seriously, but rather seen as a representation of the absurdity of the Texas law by flipping the script. So, with that said, let's take a look at this article that I have found. Democrats sponsored Texas Act would allow $10,000 bounties on those who cause unwanted pregnancies. And this is from NPR Illinois. 2 weeks after Texas effectively banned abortions after 6 weeks of pregnancy, a Democratic state lawmaker in Illinois is proposing a law based on Texas's model, but turned on its head. State Representative Kelly Cassidy, a Democrat from Chicago, who in 2019 sponsored a law defining abortion as a fundamental right in the state of Illinois, is introducing a bill dubbed the Expanding Abortion Services Act, the acronym which spells Texas. So the law is being proposed as kind of a countermeasure to the idea that in Texas, if you label someone or find someone being complicit in the act of performing an abortion or getting an abortion after 6 weeks of pregnancy, then a person can sue them for $10,000 in minimum damage as a quote unquote bounty. And in a lot of ways, it really is a bounty where a lot of citizens are being deputized to be able to enact these lawsuits to make it effectively illegal because of the financial constraints, so that no one wants to perform an abortion. And in the case of people, they are no longer able to get access to getting an abortion. So they've been fleeing to a lot of other states to get access to abortions and care when they've needed it. So Cassidy's proposal here would instead allow Illinoisans the right to seek at least $10,000 in damages against anyone who causes an unwanted pregnancy, even if it has resulted from consensual sex. So in all instances, if you are the person who caused someone else to become pregnant, you would have to incur a $10,000 damage if that person decided to sue you in court or anyone wanted to sue you for that unwanted pregnancy. So if folks are policing bodies of the people who are seeking reproductive health care in Texas, well, then maybe we should be policing the bodies of people who are causing those problems here in Illinois, Cassidy told NPR Illinois. And I cannot tell you how much of a relief it is to finally see some shots fired by a Democrat. I know ultimately this isn't really going to do much, and it's probably not going to pass, and it probably shouldn't pass at the end of the day, right? It's not going to fix the issue. But what's fascinating here is that when this kind of logic is applied back towards a lot of these conservative policies, it ends up looking absolutely ridiculous. And that's what I think this is meant to highlight. And if we look further into the legal parts of the bill, under Cassidy's bill, half of the damages awarded would go to a new state abortion freedom access fund to be managed by the state's Department of Healthcare and Family Services. The money would also be required to be halved even if a case is settled. The fund would be used as a financial aid for people from states with limited abortion access to travel to Illinois for the procedure, meaning it is effectively undoing a lot of the damage that's been happening. People who cannot get out of the state of Texas would be allowed access to the money in such a fund to be able to go to Illinois to get the procedures, and it would provide funding in this way. While Cassidy acknowledged the bill's name and modeling after the Texas law includes some elements of trolling, and I love it, the amount of trolling in the naming of it being the Texas Act is absolutely amazing. I love it. I love every minute of it, and I'm there for it. She said she's serious about getting co-sponsors and a hearing on the legislation. Now, I think that's really important, because the fact that this might go to the floor and it might actively be discussed, and that people are going to have to confront the opposite side of a lot of what happened in the state of Texas, might provoke some people to actually consider what it is this law is actually doing and how it's hurting people. In a lot of these instances, it's always put on the pregnant person to be responsible, that their body is the one that's always up for grabs, as it were. And, their choice is constantly put into question, whether or not they're allowed to get a procedure that could dictate the rest of their lives, really. But it's never really flipped on its head in the way that it's being flipped on here, where the person who does the impregnating is in any way responsible. And in many ways, the people who do that are often able to get off without any responsibility. And if they do, it's usually in other types of financial procedures later when the child is born. And effectively, that can create cycles of poverty for both people, and it's damaging. But by flipping the script and changing the language, we change the tone of things. We change a lot of how it's perceived. And I think that's an important aspect on why this bill, even if it doesn't get through, and it probably shouldn't get through, why this bill is going to highlight some of the issues with the Texas bill itself. So, if there's a way that conservatives are going to police women's bodies, according to Cassidy, as we have had states do, with a great deal of intentionality, we have established ourselves as a safe haven. We also have to figure out a way to manage that. And so the thing is, it's basically firing back at the state of Texas by stating, if you're going to have these laws, then we're going to create counter laws. And we're going to be able to fund these people to make sure that they're able to get access to the ability to get an abortion when they want and need it. So it only took 2 days after the Texas law was enacted for us to see Texas patients in Illinois, despite the long distances they had to travel. And they expected those numbers to significantly increase when these dangerous laws continue. And so as more states start to produce this, you're going to see people having to travel further and further to get access to abortions. And of course, because of the situation of some people in certain states, they won't be able to travel due to economic conditions. So that's going, as well as other factors, really, but it's going to be largely an economic issue where those in the greatest amounts of poverty are not able to get access to these procedures. Now, of course, there had to be a counterpoint to all of this in this article. You have this person, Ralph Rivera, of the Illinois Right to Life Action. They claim that they didn't find Cassidy's bill very funny. I have to say, it's absolutely hilarious. We're talking about human life, Rivera said. It's not silly, taking a serious matter and trying to be flippant. She could have just stated that and not filed a bill. I need to take this into its proper context. This is a serious matter, and the Texas bill is a serious matter, and we are talking about human life. We are talking about the rights and life of people who are pregnant to be able to make a decision about their own bodies, to determine whether or not they can continue or even want to continue to raise a child, and whether or not that child, while it's still in a form that cannot sustain itself in any way, shape, or form, and while we don't have the economic means of continuing to care for the children in a lot of the state apparatuses, whether or not the state has a right to interfere with that child being born or not. And no, they don't. We are taking this very seriously. In fact, this bill is putting it on blast about the fact that people who do the impregnating part are not taking their part and are not taking their responsibility in most cases. And again, it falls onto this person who has to now carry a child with them for about 9 months to term, whether they want to or not, and are effectively being hooked up to a life support system with this, fetus entity. The embryo that becomes a fetus is now hooked up to a person on effective life support mandated by the state, and of course through these bounty systems, to have to continue through to term, even if they don't want to. And that is a major issue. So when we get back to all of this, the fact is this law is unlikely to succeed. But I think it really does highlight the absurdities of the Texas anti-abortion law quite nicely. And to be honest, it's really nice, like I said, to see a Democrat fire back for once instead of sticking to the status quo entirely. And at least it gets the message out. And at least it's going to bring it to the floor and get it discussed. And this idea of deputizing people to create bounty cases is truly absurd. It literally gives people the power to financially ruin other people for performing a safe medical procedure and to protect a person's body and choice. If this was applied in just about any other concept that didn't control the bodies of people who can get pregnant, it would be dismissed right out of hand. And when this language gets flipped on itself, it highlights just how absurd and how sexist the nature of such a law truly is, because we generally don't think about it in terms of the people who cause pregnancies, only those who have them. And if you take this law in any of the other contexts, even if it's in something like a company having to pay for the externalities of the damage that they cause, they consistently get away with it. And it's just like, all of these other factors can be ignored. But when it comes to a person's body and choice, that's where we draw the line. That's where the decision is made that it's no longer allowed, and that we can declare these bounties and declare these procedures. Can you imagine if we could say, well, if a company were to spill oil, that you were able to sue them for $10,000, how quickly that would change things and how a lot of these conservative elements wouldn't be in favor of it? Now, that to me seems like a decent and reasonable idea. However, it would never be applied under these current status quos and systems. So with that said, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button and bell for notifications. You can follow me on Twitter and check out my Discord in the description down below. My name is Anarchist Tara, and I thank you for watching.